You ever look a man in the eyes and see your whole life fall apart in his smile? I did, and I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday. I remember that because the coffee machine at my office only worked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I worked the front desk at a firm full of men who wore suits with teeth. They talked fast, shook hands hard, and always smelled like expensive cologne and quiet betrayal. I was just the guy who smiled, buzzed them in, signed packages, and kept his head down. Until that Thursday. He walked in at 7 a.m., sharp. The kind of sharp that tells you nothing about him is accidental. Tall, navy blue suit, cufflinks that glinted like they had stories. He leaned on the front desk, looked right at me, and said, "I'm here for a meeting with Randall Pike." I checked the schedule. Nothing. Randall Pike was one of the partners, the kind who made more in a month than I'd seen in 2 years. But no meeting was listed. "I don't see anything on the calendar," I said politely. "Do you have a confirmation email or—" Before I could finish, Randall himself appeared around the corner. "It's fine," he said. "He's with me." The man smiled again. Same eyes, same jawline. That's when I realized who he was. My father. I hadn't seen him in 28 years, and I was 31. He abandoned us when I was 3 left, my mother with nothing but a wedding ring and a pile of debt. No calls, no visits, just disappeared like he never existed. And now here he was, standing in my lobby, smiling at my boss like they were old college buddies. He didn't even flinch when he looked at me. Didn't say my name, didn't blink, just kept walking. I stood frozen, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. My palms were damp, my throat dry. I wanted to scream, to punch through the desk, to shout, "That's my father. That man ruined our lives." But I didn't, because that's what powerless men do. I went home that night and stared at my mother's old photo. She died 3 years ago. Heart attack, they said. But I knew better. It was the stress, the bills, the years of working doubles to keep us fed. She never remarried, never stopped waiting. I remember asking her once, "What would you do if you saw him again?" She just smiled sadly and said, "I wouldn't waste my breath." But I would. The next morning, I walked into work early and pulled the visitor logs. His name was Richard L. Callahan. He'd signed in like any normal man. No hint of guilt, no trace of shame. That was his mistake. You see, I'm not just a front desk guy. I used to be top of my class. Had scholarships waiting. I left college in my final year when my mother got sick. I sacrificed my life to hold the pieces together. But now I had a new mission. Revenge. And this time, I was going to do it smart. No fists, no guns, no shouting in lobbies. I was going to take everything from him. Slowly, legally, publicly. Because the man who taught me nothing was about to learn everything. I began my plan that weekend. First, I needed to know who he was now. I searched his name online, found a dozen articles. Richard Callahan, financial consultant, board member of multiple nonprofits, recently remarried to a woman half his age. He had 2 sons, twins, 15. One was already trending on TikTok for luxury car vlogs. I gagged. I kept digging. Business dealings, real estate, shell companies, offshore accounts. He was a millionaire many times over, and not the clean kind. He'd built his fortune on hidden loopholes, silent partnerships, and creative accounting. His resume was spotless, but the margins were dirty. Then I struck gold. A whistleblower blog claimed that Callahan's name had surfaced in a quiet investigation linked to embezzlement through a veterans charity. Nothing proven, no charges, but the document leak was enough for me. I printed everything. The next step was getting access. He was now advising our firm's partner, Randall Pike, on a private merger deal. That meant he'd be around more often. I just had to wait. And one day, he walked in alone, I offered him coffee. He took it. New here? He asked. I nodded. 3 years. He looked around. This place has changed. I smiled. Yeah, so have people. He didn't recognize my voice or my eyes. That hurt more than anything. Still, I played nice. We chatted. He talked about his kids, his wife, his Tesla. I asked, ever lose someone and regret how you left things? He paused, then said, not really. Life moves forward. And just like that, I knew he didn't regret leaving. He probably forgot he ever had a first son, but I remembered everything. That night, I contacted the whistleblower anonymously, sent them documents I'd quietly copied from Randall's office while cleaning out the printer. I added some firm emails, financial projections, enough to fuel suspicion. The story broke 3 days later. Veterans Charity probe linked to top financial advisor Richard Callahan. He was splashed across the headlines. Randall was furious. Meetings were canceled. His son's social media accounts went dark. And yet, Richard stayed calm until the IRS came knocking. But this wasn't even the revenge part. Not yet. This was just the appetizer. The main course? That would be personal. Because he still didn't know who was doing this. And I intended to show him only when it hurt the most. I always thought revenge would feel like fire, hot, fast, explosive. But it didn't. It felt like ice, slow, controlled, sharp enough to cut through steel. After the news broke, Richard Callahan did what men like him always do: deny, deflect, lawyer up. He hired a crisis manager, released a vague public statement. Misunderstandings, baseless accusations, deep respect for veterans, the usual script. But the world had already tasted blood, and I wasn't done feeding it. You see, once the IRS came sniffing around, his business partners started distancing themselves. His non-profit board suspended him, pending investigation. Randall Pike, he pulled out of the merger and fired 2 junior analysts just to look tough. But not me. I stayed right where I was behind the desk, smiling, invisible. That was the beauty of it. He still didn't know it was me. Not when reporters swarmed his gated community. Not when anonymous tips showed up in government inboxes. Not even when a second whistleblower surfaced someone I may or may not have invented with a burner phone and a fake LinkedIn. I'd spent my whole life being overlooked. Now I was using that to erase the man who erased me. But it wasn't enough, because this wasn't just about ruining his career. It was about making him face what he did. Face me. So I started phase 2, personal infiltration. He came into the office less now, too much heat, but he still had regular calls with Randall over Zoom. I offered to upgrade the conference room setup. It was easy to patch the system so I could listen in remotely. That's how I learned everything. About the mistress he was hiding from his new wife. About the hush money paid to cover a fraud lawsuit 10 years ago. About the private tutor he hired for his sons, paid under the table, off the books. Every detail was a thread, and I was pulling them, one by one. I knew his schedule, his passwords, even the name of his dog Oscar. A little mutt with a designer collar and no idea his owner was a snake. Then came the opportunity I'd been waiting for. An intern position opened up at one of Callahan's smaller shell companies, Crescent Oak Holdings, a fake name for real money laundering. I applied under a different name, got the interview, nailed it. They didn't even run a full background check. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a satellite office with access to internal files. And what I found made my stomach turn. Money moved from charitable donations into shell accounts. Those accounts funneled funds into real estate flips, luxury cars, offshore trusts. He was stealing from veterans, from cancer patients, from food banks, the very people my mother once stood in line beside. I printed everything, not just copies, certified backups, hidden hard drives, physical duplicates in 3 separate lockers, because this was going to end big. but I needed a moment. Oh, the moment. So I waited, and then I saw a gala invitation posted online. The Heroes Among Us charity banquet. Black tie, high profile. Richard Callahan was set to receive the Humanitarian of the Year award. I almost laughed. That was it. That was the stage. So I bought a tux. Got a cheap ticket through a friend who worked catering. Didn't even sit at a table, just stood in the back, glass of water in hand, invisible again. Until the moment came. The lights dimmed, applause rose. Richard Callahan walked onto the stage in a crisp tuxedo, smiling like he still owned the world. He took the mic. "I've spent my life trying to give back," he began. I stepped forward. One more step, then another. I was close enough to see the gold trim on his lapel when I spoke. Loud, clear. "What about the life you walked out on?" Silence. Every head turned. He froze. I kept going. "You remember me now? Or do you still forget the son you left behind so you could play philanthropist?" Gasps. Phones lifted. People recording. I pulled the drive from my pocket. "This contains years of fraud. Documents, transfers, testimonies. You want to talk about giving back? Try giving back the millions you stole." He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The damage was done. Security tried to approach, but I held my hands up, calm, unarmed, unbothered. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said. "I just wanted to give him something he gave me when I was 3. I paused. Closure. Then I walked out. The next day, the video went viral. Within 48 hours, the gala donors pulled out. Within a week, federal agents raided Crescent Oak Holdings. And finally, Richard Callahan's perfect world collapsed. He was arrested 2 months later. Wire fraud, embezzlement, perjury. He lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom. But even then, I wasn't sure if it was enough. Because he still had something I didn't. Peace. I found that out when I visited him in jail. 6 months into his sentence, he looked older, smaller, like someone had turned down the light inside him. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Why?" he asked. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "Because you took everything, and I needed to take something back." He nodded slowly. "You could have ruined me quietly," he said. "Why the public humiliation?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Because I wanted the world to see you the way I always did." And then I walked out. No threats, no anger, just silence. That was the real revenge. Not the headlines, not the downfall. The knowledge that his forgotten son had risen from the ashes of his betrayal and burned his empire to the ground, with nothing but patience, proof, and pain. And I didn't need his name, because I'd already made my own. It's strange how quiet everything gets after the storm. No reporters outside my building, no headlines shouting his name, no calls from lawyers or anonymous threats, just silence. And in that silence, I finally understood something. Revenge doesn't fix the past, but it does level the field. 6 months after I confronted Richard Callahan at the gala, he was officially indicted on 12 counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. He didn't even fight it, pleaded guilty. Cut a deal. 8 years in federal prison, with a possibility of early release in 4. 4 years in a cell for decades of destruction. Some called it justice. I called it a start. I remember the sentencing hearing clearly. I sat 3 rows back. He didn't turn around once, didn't glance my way, but I watched him. Watched as the same man who once smiled at my boss without recognizing his son now stood in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, head down. When the judge asked if he had any final words, he hesitated. Then he turned slightly. Not all the way, just enough for me to see the side of his face. "I made mistakes," he said, barely above a whisper. "Some I can never fix." And for a second, just a second, I thought I saw something in his eyes. regret, fear, maybe even shame. But it didn't matter, because it was too late. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in years. No cheers, no applause. Just a quiet wind and a long sidewalk home. But it was enough. I had a job interview the next week, junior analyst at a mid-sized firm downtown. Real potential. A real future. When the manager asked me why I left my last job, I told her the truth. Personal reasons. She didn't ask for more, just smiled and said, "Well, we're glad you're here now." I started Monday. And you know what? I was good at it. Not because I wanted power or money, but because I'd learned the hard way how systems worked, how to read people, how to spot the cracks before they collapsed everything. I worked my way up. Quietly. Consistently. 3 years later, I was promoted to lead investigations on internal fraud and ethics violations. Full circle, right? Some nights, I still think about him. Wonder if he ever talks about me to his prison friends. Doubt it. He probably tells them he was set up, that he had it all and it was taken from him. Let him believe that. Let him sit in his cell and remember the son he left behind. Only when it was too late to do anything about it. But I don't carry him with me anymore. I carry my mother. Her picture is in my wallet. Her smile reminds me why I chose the long road. Why I didn't settle for anger or fists or fire. Because she didn't raise me to be like him. She raised me to be better. One night, while organizing files at the firm, I came across a familiar name. A new client with ties to another sketchy nonprofit. Similar setup to what Callahan used. I flagged the file. Brought it to the partner. He smiled and said, "Good catch." And just like that, I knew I was doing something that mattered. Something he never did. I wasn't a front desk kid anymore. I was the man who took everything thrown at him, abandonment, betrayal, injustice, and built something stronger from it. My name's not on any building. No headlines, no applause. But I sleep well. I walk tall. And when I look in the mirror, I see a man my mother would be proud of. That's enough for me. As for Richard Callahan, he taught me nothing. But I made sure his final lesson was unforgettable, and I never had to raise my voice. I just raised the truth.